also the president of our organization. Joe?
Good morning. Whenever I hear a speaker speak, whether it's on TV, a motivational speaker, or a preacher, I always try to take something away from that. So a couple of years ago, I had an opportunity to listen to Charlie speak. So I learned something wise from Charlie. He said, based on how many bottles of water he had, that's how long he would preach. I promise not to be that long for Arnie. But it's good to be in the house of the Lord, and it's good to have some laughter as we remember such a somber day as 9/11. I was talking to Arnie beforehand, and I told him, I've been thinking about this. George asked me probably a month or two ago to come speak, and you think about it off and on, and I've kind of struggled because that was such a pivotal moment in all of our lives. I remember talking to grandparents, and you would hear about where they were when Pearl Harbor got bombed. They can all remember that. And so I'm sure almost everyone sitting in here can remember exactly where they were sitting the day those planes hit those towers. And it's a struggle as a first responder, because as a first responder, you know that every time you answer that call, you don't know. And so as a Christian, I'm good with that because I have a relationship with God. And so I don't struggle with if something were to happen, I know where I'm going to go. But it is a struggle when you look at the fact that that day 412 emergency responders perished. And they went to work that morning just like any other morning, expecting just a normal day of work. And no one knew, how that day would end up. So as a firefighter, as a first responder, law enforcement, every day when you put on your armor, and you go to work, you don't know where your day is going to go. But one thing that I picked up from that day is the unity. As bad as that event was, it was just, I sit today and I look at how our country is so fractured on so many forefronts, and I think about how after that day, for the weeks and months and even years after that, how unified our country was. And so as a Christian and as a person, I struggle with where we are now, politically and racially, and why are we so torn apart? And so I don't want another event like 9/11 to ever happen. But at the same time, it only seems like our country's best when we struggle, and that's when we always seem to come together. I think about 9/11, but the other thing I think about locally that brought our community together so strong was that tornado over 2 years ago. Being on the truck that night, as many of y'all know, our first call that the fire department received that night was to go to Paul Richardson's house. And I can tell you, if you've ever dialed 911, it always seems like 3 hours before the folks show up. Well, there's nothing worse than that night being stuck on Pigeon Hill waiting for a VDOT tractor to show up and knowing that you had loved ones trapped and needing help and not being able to get to them. And as I look back on that day and all the, after that night, and once we got through all the trauma of that, but then how our community came together. I mean, it was incredible. And I've shared my testimony about that night at my church about how we don't know why that happened. We don't know why God let that tornado come through our community. But there were so many miracles that night that no one will ever know about, that first responders saw, that the neighbors saw, the protective hand that God put on so many people. And so this community has been so blessed by our Father, and that's a significant event. I want to touch a little bit about firefighters, because on a day like today when we remember 9/11, it's kind of a struggle, because if you talk to most first responders, they don't really want to talk about events like that. It's almost like when you talk to a military person, you talk to those guys that went to World War II, they don't want to talk about what they saw, what they experienced, and what they went through. First responders are wired the exact same way. There's a camaraderie among first responders that if you're not a first responder, you don't get. And so we're able to talk about things because, as George said, I've got almost 30 years in. there's not much I haven't seen. And unfortunately, living in a small community, it's folks you know and love. And so it is a struggle as a first responder, but it's a struggle that you do out of love, and it's a struggle you do out of service. So most firefighters you see are very humble people. They don't want a lot of praise and glory. I fully hope that I would have more guys here today and women, but I'm not surprised that I don't, because most of them, the last thing they want is a lot of recognition. They go ahead and do what they do because of the love of humankind. And as I thought about speaking today, I thought about the parallels between being a first responder and being a Christian. Every day as a firefighter, when you go into a hazardous environment, the first thing as a fireman we do is we put on our turnout gear. As a Christian, our turnout gear can be that Bible. And so we need to read the Word, and we need to be soaked in the Word, and God will put His protective hand over us and protect us. And so as a firefighter and as a Christian, the parallels of service, Christians are humble, Christians are giving, and a lot of your first responders are wired the exact same way. So as we think about what we've done today, as we are trying to celebrate the memory of 9/11, I think about all the parallels, like I said, with church. And every time we run a call and we're helping somebody, somebody's trapped in a car or somebody's stuck in a house, and we're trying to get to them, we all say a prayer. We all say a prayer, not only to protect us, but to help us get to those victims. Every month when we have our meeting, one of the first things we always pray for is the safety of our men and our women. And thankfully, we've never had anything happen to any of our men and women here in Tappahannock. So the God has been so good to us. He's blessed our first responders in this community. He's blessed our community when we have huge tragic events, and He has brought us closer together. So before I wrap up, there's a scripture I want to share that you hear a lot in regards to first responders, and it's John 15:13. And it says, "Greater love hath no man than this, that he may lay down his life for his friends." And as Christians, we do the same thing. As a first responder, we do it, but as a Christian, we do the exact same thing. Those of you who know me know I like a joke and I like a funny story, and I don't like anything sad. So I thought of another story that kind of parallels those two things as far as being a first responder and being a Christian. Many years ago when I got out of high school, I weighed a whopping 115 pounds. And I wish I could get close to that. We'll see. But when you put on your turnout gear and your air pack, that's about 80 pounds worth of equipment. So I remember a call many years ago. I hadn't been in the fire department too long, but I was 115 pounds, but I had 80 pounds of gear on. So it was a little bit of a struggle. And we had one of those house fires that just seemed to drag on. It was just a real difficult fire to get put out. But we finally did. And toward the end of it, we were doing an overhaul or cleanup, as we call it. But it was still kind of smoky environment, so I still had my air pack on. And I ended up by myself in the back end of a house, down a hallway. And I'm not sure what happened, but I ended up tripping and falling, and I landed on my back. And I'm in a hallway, and I've got that air pack behind me. So I've got 80 pounds holding me down. I'm 115 pounds. And I wrestled in high school, so all I could think about was Willie Mitchell yelling at me to get up. But I was stuck. And being in the hallway, I couldn't roll over to one side or the other and try to get myself up. So, you start almost as a panic because, I was green. I was a new fireman then, and I didn't know what was going to happen. And so, of course, the first thing starts going in your mind, I'm going to die. There was no fire left, but there was some smoke. So I'm sitting there struggling. And finally, a veteran firefighter, big burly guy, comes along, and he looks at me and kind of in this Willie Mitchell voice, "Boy, get your butt up." And so he reaches down with one hand and literally picks me up by the scruff of my neck and stands me back up. So I was relieved because I really thought I was going to die that day. struggle, and when we get down, we feel like we're pinned down and we cannot get up, and there's nowhere to turn. Where do we go? We turn to God, and God is there to pick us up every day. So thank you all